Thank you. I've got the slightly provocative title of Editing for the Masses. I seem to find that most JOSM users don't like Potlach developers saying we are for the masses. I want to put the talk into context, because Potlach2 is reasonably new, and it's worth talking about what came before. This is Potlach1. Now, does anybody remember what came before Potlach1? There's a few people I know in the audience who had the pleasure of dealing with the Java applet, which would work once a week or so on a good day. So Potlach1 was a revolution in easy to get started with OpenStreetMap mapping. With the infamous live editing mode, which caused more heartache, perhaps, than even today's licensing debates do now. It was written by Richard Fairhurst, pretty much single-handedly, and was an ActionScript 1-based application, which meant it had certain limitations to it. This was by far the easiest editor to use, but still had the problem that you needed to know all the tags in order to fill in the details here. There's very limited support for helping people who didn't know tags. And also just there was no toolkit available for making this application. So everything you see here is hand-constructed. The widths of these boxes are kind of programmed by hand. You know, in the code it says go to this point on the screen and then draw a rectangle which is this number of pixels wide and this number of pixels high, which means trying to fit in Karlsruhe schema addresses, you know, there's just not enough space, made internationalization hard and so on. So a couple of years ago we started on a complete rewrite to create Potlach2 with slightly more modern technologies and a different approach to how we want to do things. And although Richard's never said this, I think the philosophy of creating the new version of Potlach was to ensure that the simple things that we want people to do should be as simple as possible, but in order to get the JOSM guys off our back, everything should be possible. We should be able to do nested relations if we want to do nested relations. There's just no reason to make that kind of nonsense easy. And there's also a variation of this slide was just on Mookie's presentation before mine. This is showing that with some dubious statistical merits, as the number of users in any square kilometre of OpenStreetMap data increases, the average positional accuracy decreases. So this is showing that there is an importance to getting as many different people involved in any particular area as possible. There is a strength in OpenStreetMap by having more people involved rather than just a smaller number of people editing more often, being more dedicated. So again, this shows the need for a kind of simple, easy-to-use editor that many thousands of people can pick up quickly. And many thousands of people is the right thing. Here's some statistics that Matt creates. You can find these on the wiki in much more detail. And since Potlach2 was launched, there's been more than 30,000 people have used it. The number of people using Potlach2 for the first time increases by 1,800 users every week. These are people who have never edited with Potlach2 before. It's already the second most widely used editor ever, i.e. there's more people who have used Potlach2 since it was released than have ever used any other editor behind Potlach1. It's the third most heavily used editor ever, again behind Potlach1, but also behind JOSM. And even today, more data is contributed with JOSM. There's no fact, like the most committed mappers tend to use JOSM, but the more number of people use Potlach2. That number of increasing users per week, there are only 6 OpenStreetMap editors in the history of the project that have had more users in total than 1,800 users that we're adding every week. So maybe that's giving you a scale of how many people are involved. So a quick rundown of the features for anybody who's managed to avoid it. We have editing, we have data, aerial imagery, drag and drop, points of interest. You can just put them in the right place. It's as simple as possible to get started. When you select a feature like this road over here, the side panel gives you some nice, easy-to-use input fields. You see we have a name field. You can just type the name in. There's no needing to know what the tag behind it is. We have drop-down dialogues for entering speed limits with all the common speed limits preset. when you want to categorize what kind of feature it is, you've got nice icons to show you the differences, and it's all just click to select rather than having to type everything in all the time. So as a revolution on what it was in Potlach2, it strides ahead. We even have some more complex things like graphical turn restriction editors. If anybody's ever used the ones in MapZen, then that's the goal that we're aiming for. But again, here is how we can go as far as doing relations and things like that without needing to get into the nitty-gritty of showing people the tags and asking people to deal with the data model directly. But if you want to, you can. So we have an advanced mode, which if you're more comfortable editing the tags, or if you want to add tags that aren't in any of the presets, then you can do that. You can manually do the relations, you can change the relations, open up a thing, reorder them, like I say, add nested relations, if that's the kind of thing you're into. So again, the principles are make the simple things as simple as we can, make the complicated things possible. So one of the first components of Potlach2 that was created was the map drawing library, which is called Halcyon. And along with it came a new style sheet syntax called map CSS. If anybody's got any experience of creating maps with cascading style sheets using, say, Cascadenik, was one of the first ones, it's similar to that. It looks like CSS, much easier to describe than most other ways of creating maps. And also this syntax is being used by other projects, not just Potlach2. So this is Gothic, which is an awesome JavaScript and canvas-based live rendering. These aren't pre-rendered map tiles, these are all done in the browser. Again, this uses map CSS like Potlach2 does. And that lets us to be able to change the map style between different modes to show, whilst you're editing, to highlight different things that would be of interest. But we don't have many styles at the moment. We're really hoping that some more people come up with useful things. We've got a few things that are not only a revolution in Potlach, but also help move OpenStreetMap on in general. One of them is what I call closing the feedback loop. A lot of the mappers go out and map and collect their own data and then edit it in OpenStreetMap, and that's missing the feedback that we get from people who are not part of the OpenStreetMap project. Now, this is MapDust, run by Scobler, which is one of the different bug reporting utilities within OpenStreetMap. Now, to try and close the feedback loop, the best place to deal with bugs and the best time to deal with bugs is when you're actually editing the data, maybe for some other reason. And you would say, if you're editing in the area, you can see we've got a pair of bugs have been reported here saying cannot turn right at that junction. And sure enough, a little bit of research shows that although there's turn restrictions defined for this junction, it's missing the no right turn here. And this is the best time to deal with bugs, is when you're already in the best position to fix the bugs. And I think as we go on, there's a lot of opportunity for tying in more of the systems like OpenStreetBugs and KeepRight and things like that directly into the editors to try and close this feedback loop and help us increase the quality of OpenStreetMap data. We also have a system in Potlach2, alternatives to bulk imports. Usually when we're dealing with external data sets, everybody immediately thinks, well, bulk uploads.py is the way to deal with it. We just grab the data, upload it to OpenStreetMap, hope for the best. We have developed the idea of vector background layers, where we can load up different vector files, whether they're shape files, KML files, GPX files, whatever, and have them available whilst you're editing so that you can see what's in the background layer, maybe copy some tags across, maybe grab the entire geometry. I've been recently developing a system where you can even track which features in the shapefile or whatever you want to deal with have already been dealt with by the community, so you can get people nearby to say, no, it's okay, we've already got the information from this half of the shapefile, but this stuff over here is useful. And I want to, again, get people thinking beyond the idea of external data sets, the only use for them is to upload them in bulk, but to say, just like having a raster background aerial imagery has been great as a source, and we've never imported that, we can take vector data and also use it as a background source, help OpenStreetMap, but not necessarily just chuck it all in. Potlach2 can be used by third parties on their sites. It's not like Potlach1, which only ever ran on OpenStreetMap.org. So this is Cycle Streets, a cycle campaign group spin-off project, and they have got a custom version of Potlach2 embedded in their own website, so that their users can, if they've got an OpenStreetMap account, they can get started. And the infrastructure for this, all the OAuth stuff and all the components behind it are all fully developed. And people are running even more customized versions of this. So this is on vanderenrijkkaart.de. It's Potlach2, but with the icons changed to match the icons that show up on Vanderenkaart, and more of an emphasis on things that you find when you're out and about wanting to walk or ride. But it just uses the same technology stack. This is all done by CSS files for this and XML files to do that, so there's no compilation. You don't need to get into any kind of hardcore compiling to provide your own custom instance. And again, I think this is important for the project to kind of reach out beyond our standard mapping. There are other community groups who are more interested in specific features, and we can help them by providing them the same technology, but let them customize it to their own needs. One of the great things I've been involved in over the last year is getting feedback on the user interface, primarily from visiting UCL, which is the birthplace of OpenStreetMap, so it's not surprising they're one of the leading areas in it. That's me. Mookie showed this picture as well. That's me watching people in horror messing things up and going, okay, I see what you did there. That wasn't quite what we meant, but it's been great. So we had 30 people doing mapping party, new master students. I went in, stood in the background, peered over people's shoulders, and came back to the OpenStreetMap community with a massive list on the wiki of really easy things that we've never thought of that we could fix. And within a day, Tom Hughes over there had fixed half of them. This has been great. Obviously, for anybody who was there at Patrick's talk yesterday, more recently UCL have been running eye tracking and video recording of people learning Potlach2. And again, the feedback coming into us has been really useful. Again, horrifying. There's nothing like finding out that someone has mistaken the delete icon and thought it was a deselect icon. And so I'd been going around deselecting things over and over, and it took him more than 5 minutes to realize that things were slowly disappearing from the map whilst he was doing it. But the kind of feedback is invaluable for us. It's not something I get by talking to a crowd of people like this who know OpenStreetMap inside out and wouldn't ever make that mistake. So as we try and increase the OpenStreetMap reach well beyond our own normal groups, this kind of stuff's really useful. So a bit of development stuff behind it, because this is an open source project built on open source technologies. Obviously it's really important for OpenStreetMap, and it's really easy to come and help us get started. We have a mailing list for discussing it. We have our code base up on GitHub if you want to fork it. We have documentation, including extensive developer documentation, how to get started, what things you can help us with, and things like that on the wiki. We need your help. Richard is the main developer, I'm the second developer. There's been about a dozen people in total have helped with OpenStreetMap, with Potlach2, but we really do need lots more people to help, and in a large variety of ways. You don't have to be a coder to help deal with this. Can you see yourself in amongst having pizza? Pizza is always good. We have documentation for the coding stuff. We need help with documentation for things like as simple as the beginner's guide. Our famous beginner's guide still tells people how to edit with Potlach1, and it's been more than 6 months since Potlach2 was the default. So just getting started, that would be great. And also the customizations, helping us with the style sheets and things like that. Even if you're not a developer, you can help us out. If anybody wants to know any more, just come and grab me. That's it. Thanks very much.
Do we have any questions?
Hi. Well, I'm one of the people not using Potlach for the reason that there's no Flash for my platform. So
Sure.
The usual question I guess you get, what's the story with Nash? Any chance of getting this running, or does it run currently?
So the story is that there's two versions of the Adobe runtime called AVM1 and AVM3, I think, or AVM2. Nash does old Flash projects, and there's another project called LightSpark, which does the newer, more modern type of Flash files, and that's what Potlach2 is coded in. So, like I say, all the developing it is all open source. The only closed source bit is the runtime, and there is an open source project with the goal of implementing everything that's needed. Because nowadays Adobe have released all their documentation and file standards and things like that all under open source licenses. So it only needs people to reverse engineer it, and there's a team based in Italy who are already a long way through. They're at the point where they can play several things like YouTube videos and Vimeo videos and things like that. So we're just helping and trying to support them on implementing enough of the Adobe spec that we can have cross-platform open source player. That's the holy grail for us. We'd love it to be open source top to bottom without needing, it's just that one component, it's just the playing back the file. That's the only closed source bit in the whole Potlach tool chain.
The custom implementations of Potlach2 sound like a real game changer. If we can provide a custom editor for a special interest group that speaks to them in their language and allows them to edit our database and improve our database, that sounds like a really big win. Do we know how many custom implementations of P2 are out there so far?
No, I don't know how many custom implementations are. I know that there's at least half a dozen people who are running Potlach2 on their own websites. I think the Vanderin Right cart is the most heavily customized. A lot of people are just running the kind of more or less standard Potlach2, maybe with their own style sheet, but on their own website.
Is there a quick and dirty how to get started writing your own custom P2 implementation?
Yeah, there's documentation for that on the wiki. There's a deploying your own custom version how to. Is that it? Yeah, thanks very much.